and welcome to the stream for the Liberals UK discussion on the UKIP Manifesto. I'm Richard, one of the regional leads for Yorkshire and Humber region. Today we have Andreas, the university lead, and Ben, the operations lead. Tonight we'll be discussing. Tonight we'll be discussing the UKIP Manifesto in regards to our own personal views and how the Liberals values reflect upon the manifesto. So going through things, there's 30 topics on there. Technically 29 because the 30th one being Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland is UKIP will have its own manifesto according to those areas. So it's fair enough as it is. So shall we crack on with the first one then? Brexit.
Well, I suppose it's the most important thing, considering that's the UKIP.
Yeah, I mean it's the staple, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
So
it's a done deal, yeah.
Well, it definitely isn't yet, and there's other bits and bobs as we'll find out. There's a lot more to it than just the actual trade deals and that to go with it. Just double check on the YouTube page that is actually open up. There we go. So to start off, Brexit. In short, UKIP stands for no more money to be paid to the EU, no more EU laws imposed upon us, and no more jurisdiction over the European Court, and no more open borders EU immigration.
Yeah, I think that's where it's going at the moment.
Yeah.
It's like a good non-deal Brexit.
Yeah, but it's no surprise that's what we're pushing for, really.
Yeah.
It's the problem is I'm not really. I know that the Tory party and other groups are saying about sort of negotiating a good deal between the EU and so forth, and making sure that we pay our way before we leave and all that sort of thing. And they're trying to sort of be very diplomatic, where UKIP is sort of the non-diplomatic angle, which I think actually is very healthy.
Yeah.
I think it's good that we have people that are sort of more passionate and leave things. I think that if you go in too diplomatic to the table, people sort of know that you're willing to negotiate, and they're not sort of, they'll be more willing to kind of pressure you. Where I think the UKIP angle actually is the better way to go for negotiating Brexit, whether you want a good deal with the EU or not. I think you should, so I'm glad that they're sticking with this angle, and I'm not surprised either because it's UKIP.
Yeah.
Definitely, they seem to draw like a line. I'm obviously not a big fan of the whole thing in total, but it's good that they at least have like a position they can defend. I don't know, of course, how much influence they have if they're not in power. Don't know. When there is a snap election, we will maybe see a difference.
Fair enough. And to the second bullet point, irrespective of whatever withdrawal agreement, government agrees with the EU. UKIP will continue to fight for the UK's total independence from the EU and fully restore the UK's former status as an independent, self-governing sovereign state. Again, pretty much covered on that last point as well. The next one, which is a bit of an interesting one, a clean exit from the EU will include withdrawing post-Brexit from PESCO, which is the Permanent Structured Cooperation, the EU's defence union, or the nascent army, which the government agreed to prior to Brexit. So, are you guys familiar with the PESCO agreement and such like that?
Yeah.
Please remind me. I've been through so many different things recently that I've forgotten some of these acronyms and stuff.
So, PESCO is essentially a unified defence union between the member states, along with a couple of non-member states within Europe. Essentially, we'll be leaving out of it as soon as we walk out. But we've through other agreements, we've said that we will be staying along with it.
Sharing side of things as well. Is that the one where they sort of share between authorities and stuff, and forces for defence and things like that?
I think it's more of a crisis response team in its own kind of sense. And believe the main issue where the actual problem lies with it is that it holds under the Article 42.6 treaty, the Article 42 treaty with the European Union, so it's still legislated through EU law, which is probably where it's a little bit more of a problem. Let's have a look. So The criteria for the protocols are the following: cooperate and harmonise requirements and pull resources into the fields related to defence equipment acquisition, research, funding and utilisation, notably the programmes and initiatives of the European Defence Agency, like the Code of Conduct on Defence procurement, capacity to supply either at national level or as a component of the multinational force groups, targeted combat units for the missions plan structured at a tactical level as a battle group with support elements including transport and logistics within a period of 5 to 30 days, in particular in response to requests of the United Nations, which can be sustained an initial period of 30 days and extended upon 120. And then running humanitarian tasks and such like that as well, all the time. So peacekeeping as well.
Yeah, I think in general, PESCO is a very good idea. I think it's interesting that it's also signed not just by EU members, but by others as well. And even like countries like Austria, who are quite anti-EU at the moment, are pointing out that there are some benefits to it. I don't think it's necessarily leading to a European army. I think that's the main point UKIP has against it. But it's just a very interesting way to get the different armies working together. It's more about really developing a good system of communication and training in different teams. There's a long history, for example, between Germany and France. You have like a little brigade between each other, a sign of peace and a working togetherness. And I think it's good to have this for the whole of the EU. I see the problem UKIP has with the European army, but I think letting go of PESCO is just unnecessary because it's more a defensive thing, and I think it's good to have something in Europe where you don't have to rely on NATO and where you don't have to rely on the US necessarily, especially when it comes to short-term response.
I think that most of the time when it comes down to the EU stuff, PESCO and things like that, they're not bad ideas. I think they focus on the negative side of it a bit too much and are too willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And this is where I think a lot of people that have an issue with the EU and voted for Brexit, their issue really wasn't with the idea of what the EU could be. It was the fact there wasn't a limitation on powers or a clear limitation of powers. So then people like UKIP can't start sort of fear-mongering. I think really with all this sort of stuff, it's just a case of, well, just focusing on the negative, focusing on the positive. There is no middle ground with these issues anymore.
Yeah, definitely. And I think PESCO is one of the things which is actually working quite well in a European context. As much as you can criticize the EU or the European model, I think PESCO is not one of the things you necessarily want to opt out if you want to leave it.
Yeah, no,
you should keep an eye on it.
I definitely agree with you. It's one of those that it's worth keeping. It's out for mutual benefit for everybody, really. It's not like it's a dangerous thing for any state, really. It's just a matter of depending where it develops. I suppose is the best way to go about it, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
So the next bit, Britain's international standing will be enhanced by leaving the EU, as it will be a part to act independently whilst retaining its membership in of the UN Security Council, the World Trade Organization, the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, and over 100 other international organizations of which we are a member. Fair enough. I mean, it's basically saying we're not going to leave everything just the EU.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saying no fear, we are still part of the team. No worries.
Yeah, I think it's one of those. It's more of something to kind of like get rid of the fear mongering. That it's not. We're not abandoning everything and becoming completely independent on our own and nothing else, losing all our alliances and such like that.
It's one of those things that people always bang on about. It's just like, oh, we're going to be all on our own. It's like, no, we're not going to be on our own. Things will be different, and change can be difficult, but there's nothing to be afraid of. And this is the problem with the whole Project Fear thing, is people sort of panic and think, oh God, without the EU, where are we going to be? And it just annoys me that there's not enough sort of, well, it's not going to be that bad sort of angle taken by other parties. It just seems that it's only UKIP that are saying it's going to be okay.
Yeah, it only seems to be them that are doing the damage control in regards to it. I mean, you got a couple of news articles that will turn around saying, look, it's not all that bad. But then MSM to a certain degree will just turn around and say the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's just a mess.
The overall part at the end of the Brexit part is going outside the European Union. Britain will be a more prosperous nation. It will regain control of its trade policy, free business from unnecessary regulation, regain control of its agricultural industry, and restore its fishing industry. Fishing industries. I mean, that little bit will come back in a little bit later in some of the other stuff with agriculture and fishing industries as well. Increased prosperity will mean more jobs and more taxes, revenue to be paid. The things that we all want as British people.
So that's if that's if the society adapts in a healthy manner and everything works out in the most idealistic sense. I'm not someone that is a doomsayer. I think that the UK would probably be fine. I think we'll be okay, and I think we will make the best of the situation. I think that we're, as a nation, we're one that's that's been very good at adapting over the years. The problem is that I think that the UKIP are the only party that are trying to sell a vision at the moment with Brexit, and I think that a lot of the other parties are lacking vision of what a country could look like making the best of Brexit. So, of course, UKIP are going to sell this that the idea is that it's all going to be fine and we're going to be great and everything's going to be brilliant and there's going to be so much liberty and freedom and all this sort of thing. But they're not really talking about the difficult road ahead or maybe some of the issues we're going to have to adapt around and so forth. It's just that they've got the positive vision that none of the other parties are selling. So of course they're going to believe in this. But why include? It's just marketing in the manifesto. It's not. There's no content here. There's nothing to it really.
No, I mean, I personally believe when it comes down to it, it'll be. Obviously, it's going to be a hard. Things are going to get harder before they get better anytime soon, and probably going to be something like 2025, 2030 when possibly things are going to start making a turnaround. I think there's going to be a hit, obviously, but I think
it's really hard to tell.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to what the future trade plans are, what things are in place for it. I mean, there's other ideas like maybe even a different union with like Kanzuk, which I'm one of those I'm quite a bit for.
To have like a union just replacing the EU.
On the other side, you could turn around and go, well, it's going in with all our experiences from the EU and implementing it in a way that go, right, well, we're wanting to be a trading bloc and pushing in nothing else from there.
Yeah, I think that really most people weren't against the concept of a trading bloc side of the EU, and I think that if something was to if the EU was to crumble and something like this came from the ashes, then maybe it could be done right the next time. But I don't know.
Double checking something. Ben, could you increase your voice, please? The volume from your mic.
How about now? Is it okay now?
Hopefully, we'll hear back in a second.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, it sounds better to me. We've got someone. We've got Olen just saying to boost your volume a bit more because he couldn't quite hear you. So overall, that's their Brexit view at the moment. I personally think it's in keeping. There's nothing that takes away from the liberalist views. Really, I think it's perfectly fine as it is. On a personal view, I'd probably say maybe still keeping with PESCO. I mean, I'm not going to say that NATO is a bad thing in its own kind of sense, but NATO is more of a response to actual threats, while PESCO is more of a crisis response to like immediate dangers in a small controlled area.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good. Right. So
so far so good.
So far so good. So now we have the NHS policy in England. UKIP believes in an NHS free at point of delivery. I think we all do, really. The NHS is in crisis, and not from a lack of adequate funding, but because of inadequate use of funds. private finance initiative, contracts, liabilities, and ever-changing demands from foreign nationals who should have no entitlement to the use of services free of charge. So the first point is the current purchase/provider purchasing system should be replaced where possible by a more centralized purchasing system designed to capitalize on cost saving.
Yeah, I think NHS needs some overhaul, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah, I think one of the major problems that you do see is like going back through on third parties of buying supplies, which is probably one of the big issues, I think. Instead of going straight to the supplier, they're going through a different source, which is it's just wasting money because it's just putting money back into someone else's pocket.
Wasn't there an issue in terms of sourcing drugs and ignoring certain markets as well? Because I remember a while ago they were talking about changing supplies for certain drugs and looking at sort of Indian pharmaceutical companies and places like that where you can get drugs much cheaper.
I can't remember, honestly.
I'm pretty sure in terms of the people that we choose to buy our, the pharmaceutical companies that we get our supplies from, if I remember correctly, quite a few of them are more expensive than other organisations around the globe. So there are some Indian supply companies that you can actually purchase drugs straight from. You can even order some drugs online. Not that I'm recommending people do that. But actually, you can get quite a few sort of prescription medications from these companies far cheaper than if you were to go through, say, a private company in the UK.
Well, I mean, it's a quality thing in the end, I think, and whether they meet the criteria. I mean, there have been a lot of scandals in Southeast Asian pharmaceutical companies as well, where they have not that in what they print on the box, and people died, and it's really hard to tell where they get it from. So I think it's a system that needs proper setup and like a proper governmental control behind it, which is probably more difficult to have if you get it from sources you don't have the reach to really, in comparison to, for example, Europe, where they don't think Brexit will mean that there will be any shortage of drugs in Britain or something like that.
It depends on the medications. I mean, one of the drugs that I can remember you can get online is modafinil, which is a narcolepsy drug. And there's a few other ones as well that you can get that they're quite easy to get online, and they're quite cheap, and they're not. If I remember correctly with these ones, they're not. There's not too much to them, so there's not much to go wrong with them. They're quite safe from what I gather. Again, not recommending. But if there are companies like this out there, then we can save some money from some of these more simpler drugs. Then,
I mean, if it achieves the job with not adding any more side effects, I mean, what's the real issue at the end of the day?
Precisely.
It's competing on the market at a fair level, really.
Precisely, and I'm sure there are some pharmaceutical companies that we buy from that perhaps are having us on a little bit just because we trust them.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as there's some kind of expert council behind it, and the science is straight for those companies, then yeah, why not going for the cheapest option? Why not give the free market a little bit of a boost there?
Yeah.
In looking at the second point here, it says NHS and national. Oh no, I'm reading it wrong. That's my bad. Sorry, everyone, carry on.
So we'll get to the second point as well. Here we go. The NHS is a national health service and not an international health service. The NHS is open to widespread abuse by non-UK citizens. We will end health tourism by foreign nationals. An NHS health card will will entitle British citizens to use the NHS, while foreign visitors, unless specifically provided by reciprocal agreements, will be required to have private health insurance.
I think the point is very interesting. Because I think UKIP there goes far off the road, really. I mean, if I understand it right, this NHS health card will just entitle British citizens to use the NHS. And my question would be, what would be with the extreme case? You have a Polish or Swedish doctor working in an NHS hospital, or a German nurse. Are they then not able to use the NHS system themselves because they're not British citizens, even if they work there, and even if they pay taxes in Britain?
Oh, my partner as well. My partner's Lithuanian. She's got a residence card, but she's not a citizen.
Yeah.
So I wonder how they're going to define citizens in this case. Do they mean actual proper citizens, or do they mean people that have got a right to be in the UK?
I think
it sounds for me like it's proper citizenship, and that's like a very high bar to me.
I think there's something a little bit further on with like in regards to who's entitled to like benefits specifically, which I'm guessing this will probably encompass. I'm not too sure if it will or won't, but again, that might be something that'll be brought up. I think the main point that they're probably going from there is making sure that there's a reciprocal agreement between countries. Say, like if the EU agrees, yeah, actually, we do want the NHS to for our citizens to have access to the NHS, that it must be reciprocated on our end. That we've got to provide the free health. So, say basically, trying to agree with keeping e-HIC cards, possibly.
Yeah, the thing is that it's already the case in the EU, so it's not that you can just fly over, have your health checked by the NHS, and who's paying for it? The British taxpayer. There's still money you can claim back as British government. There's a very nice report about that the NHS constantly fails to claim back all the EU money it's due, really, because they just fear the bureaucratic act, actually, in some of the cases. So it's a sum of like £340 million the NHS could get back from the EU, because there's an agreement that when an EU citizen comes over and even has not a European health card, they can still get the money back from the EU afterwards. And if they just would use it, I think it's probably fine. And there's a lot of EU immigrants who pay taxes and therefore fund the NHS. Why shouldn't they be able to use it? I mean, I'm not a UK citizen. I had to use NHS before as well, and I think it's fine as long as I work, pay my taxes, bring money into the country. It should be fine, really.
Kind of like paying your dues at least to be entitled to it.
What was that?
Basically, like paying your dues, so making sure that at least you're contributing back in what you're getting back out, kind of like situation.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm all for the other things. I mean, you can always go to tourist somewhere and have like a bad accident, and then you still should be able to use the stuff. I myself had a bad accident when I was in Spain on holiday and landed in hospital, and it was all fine under the European agreements. And I think that's something that's very beneficial for the individual living in the EU, and I would love to see that continue even after Brexit, because there are a lot of UK citizens living in Europe as well, especially elderly people who might well need medical health there, and that might become an issue then for them as well.
So the other thing is, like it says here, British citizens will be entitled to use the NHS while foreign visitors won't. But the problem is it surely depends on what they need the help for as well. I mean, if someone's in a condition where they've I don't know, they've got some kind of infectious disease that they've caught whilst in the UK, not external, and that they could potentially be they could potentially infect other members of the population or something. It's something that's contagious. Surely having the NHS there to prevent something from spreading is a good thing. Surely that shouldn't be there shouldn't be a barrier to get it. And also, would they include children, or I'm interested to know, are they just saying just widespread no, or would they actually, if you ask them, they include a whole bunch of clarifications? So I don't believe that this is a good idea in a black and white sense. I don't think they should say all people shouldn't be able to access the NHS unless they're a British citizen. But if they said, well, within certain situations, yes, fine, we'll have some flexibility to that. But if they're not going to have any flexibility, it just seems silly to me.
I mean, you have to give them that it's just a manifesto, so they have to put more of a thing in an actual policy. But I think they just it's one of those examples where this manifesto is like extremely populist and extremely Britain first, and not thinking about the consequences, even for Britain itself.
I mean, one of the things I kind of stick with is like at a point the NHS should be free for non-UK citizens, and it's where I kind of stand with it is more like A&E accidents or like immediate emergency calls, really. Like I said, with like getting a highly infectious disease that needs to be treated immediately. That's where I kind of draw a line and go, yeah, fair enough. That's where the kind of help should really come into it. And then anything else, so it's like treatments following that. That's where the NHS could probably go, right, well, this is where private health insurance needs to cover.
Mm.
Yeah, I think accidents and things like that. There may be a basic private health or travel insurance policy or something like that would make sense for drunken accidents and stuff. That's fine. I completely understand that being a thing that shouldn't be given for free. But some things I just think, well, there needs to be a bit of clarification on it, because for me at the moment that's not a winning policy for me. I wouldn't vote UKIP.
Purely on that kind of thing. No.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you on that one. So we'll bump on to the next one, which is the EU. EU open borders will create a massive drain on resources by bringing in around 3.8 million additional people. Many of these people have no history of contributing significant tax revenue to help pay for the NHS, but have the same entitlement as British citizens. When Britain leaves the EU, the entitlement must not be extended to any new arrivals from the EU unless national reciprocal agreements are negotiated with individual nations. Again, I think that one's a bit covering on the same what we were just talking about there.
Yeah, it's just a bit this whole NHS and Brexit thing where UKIP really misunderstands the contribution European workers put to the NHS or working in the NHS. There's like a huge fraction of the NHS workers are European citizens. Just like fighting against them is just not attracting anyone to work in the NHS as well. Especially if you even work then, like I said earlier, in the extreme cases, you work for the NHS, but you're not entitled to use it because you're not a British citizen. And you have all the doctors and nurses falling like off the radar. It's just weird. It's a point they have to rethink massively, and it's definitely something that the UK and the EU have to negotiate about when there's a no-deal Brexit.
Fair enough. Right, so pretty much it's fair to say that we agree on that one. So the next one is the PFI scandal, introduced by the Tories and expanded by Labour. If the Tories introduced it, I believe it was in 1992, and Labour massively jumped on following Blair taking place onto it, where it was a lot of builders will go, right, we're going to build this building. The government goes, we'll pay little bits over time, but we'll obviously owe you interest on top of that. This kind of like PFI part is draining much needed funds out of our NHS. PFI contracts finance £11.8 billion to build hospitals in England, but will cost £71 billion to pay back over 31 years. UKIP will terminate these contracts by Act of Parliament where possible. I think one of the interesting parts about it is the fact that quite a few of these contractors, I believe, do have cut-out clauses where if they are cancelled, that there is a lump sum that needs to go to that company.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a point where I really agree with the manifesto. I think those PFI things are shit for most of the time. We have them in Germany as well, and they mostly go to shit if you buy something like airports or something from it. It sounds like a good idea at first because it makes the initial cost cheaper, but in like 80% of the cases, it turns out to be more expensive in the end. And I think Turkey has a big problem with that as well at the moment. So PFI is really something which really, really has to be thought through before you do it. And I think, yeah, it's used too much. And yeah, I agree with the UKIP there. It's probably a point attacking.
In your bed?
For me, it's a case of if it's a waste of money, why pay for it? And as long as we can cancel it without a massive expense to us, great. But if there's going to be an expense incurred just by having to cancel it, then we need to work out a smarter way to get out of it and minimise the impact. But either way, I'm not a fan of the 71 billion cost to pay back for an 11.8 billion. Unless we work out ways to make the money out of the hospitals themselves.
I mean, you're talking about it's 7 times, well, just under 7 times the cost of what initially it should have cost in the first place, and we're still paying it back in its own way. So it's wasted money gone through like ridiculous. like APR scheme in its own kind of way.
If it can be cancelled on a hospital by hospital basis, so you can, if you can cancel just parts of it, and maybe there's some hospitals that are worth keeping from that scheme because they're used for research or something like that. But I'd say really be smart and just work out what's really going to be the cheapest option for us, really, and the best way to stop us from losing much money.
I think it's one of those where it needs looking at contract on contract base and see what the escape clause on each one is, and then see where it can be tackled or adjusted through the means where possible. Yeah. So we've gone to the next one. The American-style litigation is out of control, with an estimated $78 billion worth of claims in the system, with the potential to destroy the NHS. UKIP will adopt a no automatic lump sum compensation policy and only pay for criminal negligence, similar to the Australian system where applicable support payments should be paid monthly. So it's more about the something's gone wrong in a surgery, I'm guessing, at this point, where they've gone, right, we'll keep you quiet, here's something sweet, here's $2,000 or 10 grand or whatever for damages that's happened on the way.
Would this include the case with the child that was left severely brain damaged or something because the parents didn't know they had to feed it?
I'm guessing probably not. No, it's probably more along the lines of, well, actually, it probably will turn around and go, yeah, we won't be paying out for that because it's maybe common sense to go with.
They sued the NHS, didn't they, if I remember correctly, and won.
Yeah, they sued them because they weren't advised to feed the child for some reason.
So I'm guessing cases like that might be controlled for a bit better.
Yeah, I think it's more the fact of where hospital agreements can be placed in, where advice is given properly and such like that, then it's only where something's been done on a bad scale, where it's been purposely done to actually hurt someone. Then that's where the payments are coming. So, in the whole kind of bad sense, because it's only happened down the road from us, where you have like a Harold Shipman kind of situation. That's where you turn that back around on it and go, yeah, actually, that guy's he's been experimenting with drugs on people. Yeah, we'll pay out for that. Or whether there's surgery purposely done wrong, I'm guessing.
I see, I get it.
It's the way they kind of explain it. Basically, you can't just sue for an attempt at trying to help you medically, because if they've done it with every kind of intent to help you and it's gone wrong, they've still tried. You've got the service. It's just they can't control how you're going to respond to treatment.
That makes sense.
I think it's fair. I think it's fair, to be honest, but
yeah, I'm not against it.
Right, so the next one we've got is we will address the shortages of GPs, nurses, and midwives by waiving tuition fees in exchange for a minimum of 5 years period to be worked in the NHS. This would dramatically increase the number of trading places for British doctors, nurses, and paramedics. British nursing applicants are being rejected because it's cheaper to recruit already qualified foreign applicants, and in some cases thereby lowering acceptable standards. We'll prioritise training our own NHS workers rather than relying on recruiting medical staff from abroad.
Yeah, again, I think UKIP has not thought that one through properly. It's one of the points, there are several which will come up in the manifesto, where I have seen no way they can pay for it. I mean, the tuition fee for like one doctor is like, I've looked up some numbers, at least £163,000 in grants and £45,000 just in tuition fees, which they would waive now. So there's a lot of money the government would throw at the system, which I don't know where it's coming from. I don't see how this will increase the number of training places, because the places still have to be paid. I mean, training a doctor is one of the most expensive ways the students get through something. You need the hospital, you need all the material, you need the professional educators and everything. So it's very, very expensive to train a doctor, and those places have to be paid. And they also don't see that it takes like up to 15 years for a doctor to train. So if you cut out tomorrow all the EU doctors, you have like more than a decade of gap to fill until your next higher generation of student doctors come out. So there's something in this in the thought process is not adding up.
The other thing is that we would need to, on balance, address the issues within the hospitals at the moment and improving the work environments there. Because I mean, if I remember correctly, with the funding issues and stuff, there aren't, some nurses have given too many patients to work on wards and things. There's not enough people per for amount of beds. But that's a funding issue as well. Not just an issue of training and having to bring in people. It's a case of actually being able to pay them in the first place. So if you have to first find the funds to pay these workers, and then on top you want to pay for the training as well, and improving the working standards. I mean, there's a lot you have to work on there. It's missing a huge chunk of the problem.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest problems I think the UK has, and other countries as well. It's like you already have a shortage in staff. You have already the NHS, which is not the most attractive pay giver in the medical sector. They can earn a lot of money somewhere else. In the private sector, they can earn a lot of more money in other countries. So you have to improve the system there first before you can do anything else. And I think Brexit will just dramatically shorten even more on the side of doctors and nurses. And they can't just train more because it takes time and they don't see it. So the math is massively off here, I think.
I think one of the big problems that they did as well was taking away nursery bursaries as well. I know this from my kind of side because my wife has gone through for applying to do a nursing degree whilst doing her work currently at the moment, and with that, it's come to a point where it's difficult for someone who wants to be a nurse to take that as an actual career.
Yeah,
I mean, it's the support that they kind of need to get through, because they're not only doing like the degree, they're also doing the work there in a hospital or in a care home or such like that on top of. And effectively they're doing work, but with no pay, and they're paying for it themselves.
Yeah, those are problems they have to tackle.
I think personally, probably getting rid of the tuition fees might be the wrong way about it, but maybe putting in like a support scheme, like I say, like bringing back nursery, the nursing tuitions, and maybe even to a point for like doctors and paramedics might be the better approach, supporting them going through it rather than saying, all right, you don't have to pay anything while we're teaching you this. Just go, we'll support you through it.
Yeah, especially, I mean, if you waive the tuition fees of doctors, I mean, those are the people who will be, in the end, be able to pay their loans back. So you should rather throw the money, as you said, at the people in the lower branches who really need the bursaries and probably are not able to pay them back necessarily in the end, rather than the doctors who will earn big money in the end.
That's nice. I think that's that one. And the last one they've got for the NHS is UKIP will scrap hospital car parking charges where possible, and in brackets, as it's currently done in Wales. These are tax on patients and visitors. I think most of us can all agree with it. The only point I'd probably turn around is, are they going to increase at least the security on it to making sure that local Joe that's just going down to the shop isn't parking in the hospital car park?
It depends on where the hospital is and also what type of hospital it is. Because I mean, there are some medical centres and things now that are, they're called hospitals, but they're not really. They're sort of outpatient centres and stuff, like a more modern style health centre or whatever they call them. I don't know what they call them. Where you don't, really having a parking charge there isn't necessarily a bad idea, because they're a lot of the time they're residential areas and so forth. And it just means that actually you can fund the centre and it has a little bit of money back into the pot again. And if people aren't going to be there for long, then the parking generally, the price of it's not too bad. Where if you've got people that are going to be spending time with terminally ill family members and so forth, I can completely understand the need to scrap the parking charges. I think it really does depend on the whereabouts and what sort of hospital it is, what sort of treatment it offers as well. I mean, I'm not too fussed if it's a small medical centre, or a medical centre type place without outpatients where you're just visiting to get a blood test and you pay maybe a couple of quid for parking.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much I think it's more of how they approach it, really, how they're gonna do it properly, isn't it? Like I say, I reckon it's I agree with what they're saying, but I think they need to look into how much it's going to cost to probably make sure that the security is right, that people are parking in there for the right reasons rather than not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. So that's the overall with the NHS policy in England. Personally, I probably say I'm yes and no, and it's a bit sketchy. But again, I don't think there's anything that's too far out on liberalist views or to the principles either.
No, not. It's more, they're missing some things, I think, and they're not.
It's something they could develop on and get it done properly and make it look and bring up an actual full package rather than just a bit of a half baked one.
Yeah, they're a bit of when it comes to equality thing. If they treat British citizens and other NHS workers differently, which one has to have an eye on. But other than that, so far not too bad.
Yep. So we've got a nice short one here. The next one is on social care and mental health in England. There's an increasing proportion of older people in the population whose care issues are not being addressed. So UKIP will increase social care by £2 billion per annum to pay for annual residents, nursing homes, and home care services. Yeah, wherever they get the money from, I'm happy with that.
That's the question.
as long as they equate the money out, I'm happy with that.
It's more of a concern of where they take the money from. As long as they're not taking it from anywhere bad, or they're actually freeing up money to be able to spend it on this, then fine. But providing other things aren't affected too badly, that's my question mark here.
And the last one there is the increasing number of younger people are suffering from mental health issues, and this needs to be addressed. We will introduce practical policies to improve the delivery of mental health services and increase mental health funding by £5 million per annum. A little bit of me goes, I do agree with this, but on the other side, I think there's about far too many mental health issues sometimes where a lot of people are being diagnosed for something where it's just I'm feeling a bit glum when they're being diagnosed for depression, where really it's not full on depression to a degree.
I want more money placed in the back end than I do the front end. The problem is this whole thing of younger people are suffering from more mental health issues. Well, it depends on the classification, and also it depends on what's causing it. What is affecting young people in the modern age? Is it a mixture of sort of an increased sense of self-awareness through social media and social pressures? Is it down to a greater choice of things in there, out there nowadays? So people are questioning their very own gender identities because there's so much choice and they're not too sure anymore. I do wonder when it comes down to the mental health issues. Maybe it's having so much information and so much awareness of oneself and so much focus now on ourselves that really these issues have just come from that. Maybe we need to research to what's causing the increase in mental health issues more so than the services themselves. If we know what's causing it, then maybe we can get better treatments.
So addressing the problem rather than treating the solution, kind of like the end results kind of thing.
Yeah. So focus on the cause as opposed to the symptoms.
Yeah. Anything there for you, Andreas? Or are you happy with that?
No.
So
again, where comes the money from? Other than that, yeah, definitely something should be addressed.
So again, that's the end of that section. I think it's one of those where again it's that last one that just feels like it's missing something, really, isn't it? It's just sorting out the actual direction of where the help comes in. Right, so the fourth one we've got is a welfare and disability policy in England. UKIP is committed to maintaining a strong and robust supportive safety net for those in genuine need, but which not be a soft touch on welfare. So the first one is UKIP will end the unfair ATOS style work capacity assessments and replace it with a system using qualified medical practitioners. I completely agree with it. To be honest, it's one of those where a counsellor can't really go, yes, this is why it is, or no, it's not. It should really come from a doctor.
So when it comes down to applying for disability benefits and so forth, I've had the absolute pleasure of having to help people, help people fill out the PIP forms and all that sort of stuff. because effectively to get a disability benefits and things like that now, you basically have to spend your time writing about how you can't do everything. You have to write about the worst things about your life and the things that you struggle doing, and focusing completely on negative aspects of your life, even if you've got a lifelong condition like cerebral palsy that won't get better. So having a qualified medical practitioner actually say, yeah, this person's got cerebral palsy, they ain't getting better. It'd be a much better system, I think, and a far more positive way of just actually making people feel supported by the society they live in.
Mm. And also, you could look at that in another sense that it might also cut down funding going out where it doesn't need to be, because you're not hiring additional people to just do quarterly or biannually reviews on someone saying whether or not they're healthy or not when they're not medically qualified. They're just going from a checklist.
Exactly. It should all be based on people actually understand conditions and can give you clear information. And so people can't take advantage of the system either. It should all be based on actual medical knowledge, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, then. The next one, UKIP is committed to protecting the rights of disabled people, and we support their inclusion in the workplace wherever that is possible. Yeah. I think that's straightforward.
Nice statement.
I mean, it's straight there in the Bill of Rights. Every man, woman, child, well, every man and woman, or every person really has the right to work. It doesn't say whether they have to be disabled or not to work, but at the end of the day, you have the right to work. Straight there, isn't it? The next one is UKIP would scrap bedroom tax, which adversely affects men disabled people. Just going through this one again, it's whether the council turns around and says, or the government turns around and said, right, well, you've got more bedrooms in a property. Bearing in mind, if you're looking at it, every person looks at a house as if it's a 2-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house. If the people living in it who are claiming benefits, the government turns around and decides that it's not really appropriate for them to have a 3-bedroom house when they could do with a 2. This is where the tax comes in and just takes a little bit back off their benefits. How do we feel on that one?
I think it's in this manifesto to catch a bit the low-income votes, because looking a bit into it, it says as reason here that it's like affecting disabled people, but disabled people can get the money they pay back for this tax, can get back from the council now, which is a bit bureaucratic and probably needs a little bit of an overhaul to make it easier. But literally all what this tax really does is adjusting or a bit make it fairer for people who are not on benefits, that those people who are on benefits are living appropriately to what they get from the taxpayer. So I don't think it's a negative thing, but putting this in the manifesto and scrapping it is of course helping the low income people who live on benefits. And I think it's a bit of vote catching, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree on that one. I think if there are disabled people that are affected by it, then yes, that side of things should be focused on and fixed. But I'm not that fussed either way.
Fair enough. The next one is UKIP will stop child benefits being paid to non-UK resident children of foreign citizens. Again, it's one of those where everyone's going to go, but I think it's fair to say it's one of those that the benefit system's been put there with taxpayers' funds to help out those that need it. I personally kind of agree with it to a level, because I suppose really it's people have not paid tax. The other side you're looking at it is going, you're probably increasing maybe even like child poverty in that kind of sense as well, where money's not being helped out for those that need it.
I mean, it's one of those populist things again. It sounds good and everyone would probably agree it, but if you look into it again and see that you can only claim the children benefits if at least one of the parents is paying taxes and national insurance, then it looks different again. So it's a tough one. I think now how it's standing in the manifesto, it's just a little too populist and not really focused on the problem.
It doesn't address the actual issue. I think it's a bold move what they've gone for, but it's a bit of
Yeah,
a it's a bit of
think
a
it's too bold. It's like a discussion which goes on like in many countries in the EU at the moment. We have the same problem in Germany as well, and in Austria. I'm saying, yeah, these shared benefits shouldn't be paid to people, and it shouldn't be paid if the children don't live in the country. There's definitely something to go after, but I think this statement is a bit too much waffle, not really much substance. I would want to hear more from UKIP about that.
Yeah, I don't. For me, I don't. I'm not against stopping child benefit for non-UK resident children. But then my question would be: is are they? If, for example, if the foreign citizens came over to the UK and they got a resident card, and the children were socialised and brought up as British children, and integrated completely into British society and are culturally British, I'm not necessarily against it, but at the same time, it's clarification again.
I think that's where we all come from. Which, funnily enough, it comes into the next part, which is UKIP will not pay benefits to foreign national residents in the UK unless they've paid tax for 5 years, which nicely rolls into that point. If they're wanting to live in the country and integrate, that's fair enough. But I think it's the previous points probably looking at those that are coming in and then they're not going to live here. So it's like those that are working, economic migrants to a degree that are willing to go back to their home country.
I'm completely for this side of things. I don't believe that moving to the UK and receiving benefits should be doable. I think if you pay tax for 5 years and you're committed to building your own life here, then fine. I have no problem with this policy at all.
I think we have to see what kinds of benefits are included. I think if someone's working and paying taxes and needs some additional benefit, for example, housing or something, it might help the integration if you build up a proper existence in a country and commit to it. But yeah, again, that's something which has to go a bit deeper than just one sentence, I guess.
Yeah. Overall, that's the welfare and disability policy in England. I think it's a pretty good one. It's supporting individual rights to a very strong degree, especially with national residents. I suppose with the last bit, but yeah, I'd say it's good. It's good, but it's just that last two it could be combined into one really to explain it all rather than being split up.
Yeah.
So the next one's one of the biggies with UKIP, immigration.
They never talk about immigration. What are you on about?
So going with this one, it's mass uncontrolled immigration has been extremely damaging to Britain. We have imported cheap labour by the millions. This not only exploits migrants, but depresses the wages and living standards of those at the bottom end of the economic scale and drives up property prices and rental costs. In 1997, the official British population was 58 million people. The figures in 2017 is 66 million. A recent report shows that the 6.6 million population growth between 2000 and 2016 was due to 80% due to migrants and birth to migrants. Such a rate of increase is simply unsustainable in one of the most densely populated countries in the world.
So with birth to migrants, they mean British children then?
And birth to migrants. What's
work?
UK population? So 8% due to migrants and birth to migrants. So it'll be.
Yeah, but if a child is born in the UK, is it British then?
Supposing it is, really, isn't it?
Yeah. That's what. Yeah, if they've migrated here, then they're British. If they're born in the UK, I mean, they might. If they can say was births to right. So 8% due to births from migrant families. That would be more accurate. But it's
a bit of a weird phrasing. Just
unless there's anyone in the chat that can explain this a little bit better, that'd be grand. So we'll go into the first point, which is UKIP believes that the age of uncontrolled mass immigration must come to an end. We have open borders with the EU, but successive British governments have also failed to control immigration from outside the EU. UKIP will introduce a selective and limited Australia-style points-based immigration system. Immigration for permanent settlement must be strictly limited.
I mean, I'm all for a point-based system. I would like to see those as well. About permanent settlement limitation, I don't know. It sounds a bit like people come to colonize Britain. It's probably a bit rough, but yeah, the point-based system would I think solve lots of problems. And
I'm for a points-based system, and I'm not against a free movement agreement with certain countries either. Actually, my main concern with the free movement of the EU wasn't that free movement itself was bad in concept. It was the fact that free movement was allowed with countries that would not give the same equal living standards to their citizens. So if you have, say, I don't know, France and England, and they have a free, if they have a free movement system, imagining the EU wasn't a thing, then the French standard of living isn't really very different to the British standard of living. So really, there's no reason for them to kind of flock to the destination, because both the nations are more or less equal. But if you have a country that, and I'm going to use my partner's country again because it's a perfect example, Lithuania, there are parts of Lithuania that look like shanty towns, and they can freely move to a country that's much better off. Well, of course they're going to move to a country that's better off.
I mean, you look at like Moldova as a situation. That's literally just a country of shantytown and post-Soviet.
Exactly. So it's a points-based system is a good idea, but I'm not. This doesn't mean that necessarily a free movement system is bad if you have a country that's got, can ensure the same living standards as your own, because it means the chances are there won't be mass migration because people are pretty comfortable where they are anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's
the same.
Yeah, it's one of those that I agree with. I agree with it. Really, it's one of those where we should be looking to get cream of the crop, really, when it comes to like migrants, rather than just continuously accepting anyone that applies to a set target number, really, which it feels like it's going towards more that direction, when really there's gaps in the market of jobs and roles that really need filling in, and that's what we should be looking if people are wanting to move into the country, to fill those gaps.
The only counter to that point really is, well, what are we doing with our own population to ensure our own population can fill those roles first? So it's not, I'm not against filling gaps with migration necessarily for certain sectors if they really are in dire need for people straight away. But in the long term, there should be a strategy to ensure that we don't require that so much.
Fair enough. It's just one of those where I think I don't know, really. Like, I know there's a lot of low income, low skill jobs that are currently taken up by these kind of places, and I think that's where a lot of the issues are coming up, which I think this is probably where this whole part of the policy is probably more targeted towards. I mean, how many times have we heard it as like damn Polish or Albanians taking our jobs, or those Romanians and such like that? And I think that's probably where that part of the policy is probably looking at.
Yeah.
So we'll bump on to the second section. Temporary immigration for workers on work permits and students will be both strictly controlled and time limited.
Yeah, that's just
straightforward in its own kind of sense, isn't it?
I think it's a bit stupid having workers coming over to work for a certain degree of time, integrating, hopefully, and then send like perfectly integrated people back. And the same with students, which is even more stupid. You get those students in, you educate them, so you invest into their education, just to send them away afterwards again, without the chance for them just keep settling. It's just a bit weird.
Yeah,
it's like investing and then throwing the assets out of the window.
It's like spending your £10 on a bet, than just going, well, I might as well just chuck it out the window, don't care about it anymore.
Yeah. It's like yeah, one in the chat says there's like brain drain in poorer countries, and I agree if they come over all the well-educated people. But for example, if you get students over, and I know myself from the student system in the UK, a lot of them will get the education and get back on their terms. But you also get a lot of well-educated students then who settle in Britain and do a lot of good work and pay a lot of taxes in their life. So why send all of them away? It's just weird.
Yeah, there's a balance to all of this, I think.
Yeah.
The next one, UKIP will develop a UK border force with immigration control department directly responsible to a minister. This department will oversee the immigration system and border control.
With what money?
Again, there's no cost for it, so you call it on that one.
Just, I don't know why I'm just picturing I'm just picturing people in really cool suits for some reason, cool uniforms and things. A bit, sort of patrolling the beaches.
I'm just imagining, what is it, the whole kind of like Bill in the War situation going on here, really.
Yeah. The MCD.
Just get a bunch of Lancashire people with a couple of shotguns on the Channel Tunnel. It's a bit of an odd one, really, isn't it?
As long as they have sex appeal when they hire them, I think they should be sexy.
As long as they are a bit fit. As long as they're faff-as.
This just seems weird. Surely we already have a border force or some level of immigration control that's just it needs some help.
I think it's there. I think it's exaggerating a point that something that we already have, but they're going, but we'll do it better, and it's like, but it's there. If you want to support the systems that are already there, do that. You don't need to make another department out of it.
Yeah, improve what's there. Don't create a new high octane migrant finding force.
The next one is migrants will not be able to claim public housing or benefits until they have been a tax-paying resident in the UK for a continuous 5 years.
Fine.
Yeah. Yeah, if that goes with the benefit system, that's fair enough. I suppose it because we are talking about migrants here rather than immigrants, which is a completely different thing. But yeah, it's coming over and I suppose living here for a bit and such like that. Then yeah, they should be in the country for a bit longer time, so at least they can put the money into the system.
Yeah, I think the only time there should ever be any flexibility to this point is if, say, for example, if we have a points-based system and we identify a skills shortage. We wouldn't necessarily allow the widespread claiming of public housing, but if we had some form of schemes to help them, get over here and integrate in with the skills that they have, I'm not necessarily against that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I think I remember V saying that in Romania, like the doctors' wages aren't as good as outside of Romania. So, say for example, if you needed to get some doctors in from somewhere else in Europe or somewhere like that. And they don't necessarily get paid as well, then if we helped them to settle into a job that they'd easily be paying us back in no time, then I'm not against a scheme or something, but I don't believe that public housing or benefits should be a standard thing for anyone that hasn't contributed for 5 years, definitely.
The next point, workers on permits and students will be expected to possess private health insurance as a condition of the entry to the UK unless covered by reciprocal medical treatment agreements. I think this goes back to the whole NHS argument where they were going about earlier, and I think to a degree, I don't really agree with that in a sense. If they're doing the work and putting the labour in and paying the taxes anyway.
Yes, if they're spending if they're paying tax in the UK, then I think that they should get the NHS.
Yeah, I mean, do they need to do the whole thing for 5 years and then get the whole thing or not? I mean, it's an interesting one because I can see it easily going in the way that once Brexit happened, we'll be having probably a deal with Poland just as very quick to just turn around and go, yeah, if you sort our medical health, we'll do the same for you. And I can see them agreeing to it straight away because there's a lot of interest between both countries, especially with those that are economic migrants between the two countries anyway, at least.
And again, it makes also Britain more unattractive for skilled workers and students to go to if you know you have to pay for private insurance, especially like students who are not the most prominent class draining the NHS because they're all young and mostly fit. So just putting this burden onto them is just deterring good students from coming to the UK. And why should you do that?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty straightforward there. And the last one is UKIP will rescind the UK's assent to the Barcelona Declaration 1995 and the Marrakesh Declaration 2018. Both of these documents have paved the way for yet more uncontrolled and unlimited immigration from Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. I think on that one, it's probably them looking more at the. Again, I think it mixes in with the more at the extreme side of Islam, where they're trying to probably more target it, but then putting it as a broad general thing and saying, well, the entirety of it, yeah, let's put that in.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those points in the manifesto where it's again going away from tackle global problems like this uncontrolled immigration and immigration problems in the world to try to solve them all by themselves. I don't think it's the most productive approach, leaving all those declarations and agreements and just try to do, we just shut the borders and that's it, and the rest of the world can just go their way. And I don't think that will be good in the long term.
But are these EU declarations, or are they?
No, they are declarations especially made with African countries to work together against like uncontrolled immigration and help on their end as well, like fighting against reasons people leave those countries, working together when it comes to fight human trafficking and stuff like that. And I think those are agreements that should be international and not just Britain doing its own thing.
I think the Barcelona Declaration runs through the EU. I'm not too sure about
probably that one does, but Marrakesh does not.
Yeah, I think that might be a UK specific one, isn't it? Really.
So, would the Barcelona one affect us still if we were to leave the EU?
I think it gets taken away because I believe that's an EU law.
Okay. I don't know enough about these, so I can't really comment on them.
No, I don't know a right lot, but look, quick look in Google. It says that the Barcelona Declaration was agreed by the EU, so therefore, respectively, takes us in the Marrakesh Declaration. Let's have a look. The Marrakesh Declaration is a statement made in January 2016 by more than 250 Muslim religious leaders.
No, that's another one.
Oh, that's a different one.
Yeah.
Why do they have to put that in? That's a bit of a weird one, isn't it?
You have to put like 2018 behind it, and then
and all I'm getting is the UK sold us out again. The UK government sold us out. So I don't think I'm going to get a straight one on that one, but a lot of it is conspiracy files of like mass immigration 2.0 coming to Europe, such like that. So it looks like it's a big thing. I mean, it was one of those where again. Actually, no, it's not even. Again, it's more. I'm not actually surprised that Hungary's turned around and said, no, we're not accepting it.
So more research is needed.
Yeah, especially on that one. I mean, I'm more than happy to have a look at that one again at some point. But I think, like the Barcelona one, will be null and void. But I think it's more about. I think that's UKIP's again attack on going right. Let's reduce Muslim migrants in its sense. I think that's as it is, isn't it? Really.
Yep.
I think that's the end of the migration part. The only thing I kind of say personally, I agree with a lot of it. I think that last one, to a point, it might take away from the secularist views that we have to a point, but it depends if we're identifying a particular group or if we're a particular religion or a sect of the religion that causes the issues, and whether we address them, which I think should be a little bit more specific in that kind of area rather than going from these countries, because there could be plenty of other decent, honest folk from those areas.
Yeah, but if it's with the unlimited immigration from Africa, Middle East, and beyond, surely that might include also economic migrants and things. They might be talking about the economic migrants as well that have come in as part of the refugee crisis. So I don't read between the lines and see Islam in there. I just read between the lines and say different parts of the world.
Yeah.
The only big problem I would see is this line with the birth to migrants. It's a little bit fishy.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Right, we'll bump on to the next one, which is housing. Everyone's favourite. The UK does not have a housing problem, it has a demand problem, with demand being fueled by mass uncontrolled immigration. Supply of housing supply cannot keep up with the demand. We cannot stabilise the housing problem until we have a controlled immigration. So the first point is, one of the most significant problems has been the immigration of the European Union has enjoyed access to social housing on the same basis as British citizens. Post-Brexit, UKIP will end this.
Yeah, I've looked into the numbers of that, and that's like a non-problem, really.
Yeah, it's a non-issue, because that's going to happen regardless anyway, isn't it?
Yeah,
unless something's agreed.
So it's not UKIP doing it for the one point, and the other hand is 91% of social housing in Britain is used by UK nationals. So it's 3 times more likely for a EU national to get into private housing. So what they do, of course, they add to the demand, but that also, of course, is good for the housing industry, for builders. There's a big market to fill, and I think it's not a problem really, if you invest in this market and make people build, and they come later to using like brown areas to build houses and everything. There's a lot of money in it if you make it clever, because like especially EU nationals are very keen on getting to in the private market and just meeting this demand, which is create a lot of money, create jobs. And if you put enough investment in, because the demand is high and you hire the offer of it, you can keep the prices stable as well.
Fair enough. Anything to add on to that, Ben?
Not really. I don't agree with this whole it's a demand problem and it's mass migration that's the problem. I don't agree with that at all. I think it's just a case of we've got an aging population and a population that's multiplying as it would, when it's healthy and able to grow and flourish. I don't think that migration is the right drum to bang on with that.
Yeah,
definitely
agree with you on that one. So the next one we got is overseas investors now purchase approximately 60% of residential new build properties in central London, and overall 30%, around overall 30%. Therefore, driving up property prices. These properties are often left vacant. UKIP will introduce a 5-year residency qualification for any non-UK citizen buyer of a residential property in designated areas in England. Rich foreigners will try to find loopholes, no doubt, and the government will try to close them. I think that last part of it, funnily enough, it tries to cover the step on the last little bit where they're going on the 5-year residency qualification.
I thought that originally UKIP was supposed to be the more libertarian-y party. Am I wrong?
They're supposed to be, aren't they? Right? They are a right-wing libertarian group.
This isn't really libertarian at all. The problem is I'm not against I understand the problem, and I understand the fact that there are, buildings and places in London that are being bought up by rich investors from overseas, and these properties might be left empty and whatever. I completely understand the problem there. The issue is that I don't know. I think you have to be very careful in the way that you address it, and to me, this kind of goes away from the whole libertarian angle they used to play.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I kind of agree with them here, because it's kind of ridiculous to have all those houses sometimes half a street, whole street in central London just empty because some Russian oligarch bought it just to sell it a few years later for double the price. It's definitely something that should be done against it, because it's just a problem which will grow in the future, I think. So good on them to having a decent idea to meet it.
It's a good, it's definitely a problem that needs to be addressed. I wonder if there are other ways around it.
Yeah, I think they've got the right idea. I think their execution's probably the wrong way about doing it, to a degree.
Yeah, I think that maybe there should be I don't know. Maybe there should be a set amount of properties that are allowed to be purchased by foreign investors. However, a certain percentage should remain with the population or something. I don't know. I don't know how I'd go about it. I don't think the 5-year residency qualification is the way to go.
I think it should be probably like a cap on, like you said, a cap on so many properties you can buy, probably within a set area if they're going to be doing it that way. So then that way it doesn't disclose businesses to a sense, to say like property developers and such like that. But maybe cap it within like a 50-mile area or such like that if they're going to be doing something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, it's either that or they must, the other way of doing it is actually require the people that have purchased to also purchase or utilize some of the properties they've bought for, say, council use or something like that. That just so that the population aren't losing out to someone that's not even visiting this place for years at a time.
Yeah.
It's definitely something where you have to be cautious. If you look at our principles as well, because everything we say then inflicts somehow what do they do with their private property. It's quite a difficult one.
So we'll jump on to the next one. It should be possible to build 1 million new houses on brownfield sites. We will offer grants to bring this land into use. If you know what brownfield sites are, it's properties, places that have already been built upon, and nothing's been done with them afterwards. So, like, pretty much places where mills have been left abandoned and such like that. Again, I kind of agree with it. It's something that's already been developed upon. Just get it back going again instead of going on green sites and such like that again. There's no need for it to keep building upon new places when you can look at the environmental damages and such like that when we've already got places that could just be restored.
I've seen forests near me getting chopped down to build new properties and things. I would rather brownfield sites get used than that.
Yeah. It's just other thing, but also comes to the other point. It is this idea that the demand can't be met. And I think they bring own ideas now with brownfield and everything to have that, and abolishing stamp duty and stuff like that, and all the other taxes. If you just really give some nice input into the housing market, there are ways to meet the demand and make good money for British people out of it.
I think probably one of the issues that probably arise from it is probably like demolition, or like safety, health and safety specifically around it, which will probably be the thing. But I think in the long run, it'll probably work out better to redevelop on these sites. Like there's a lot in my local area where you see there's been mills that have been redeveloped into apartments or business centres and such like that. I mean, specifically, a good example for us is we've got the Deanclough Mills in Halifax, and that's it was like the UK's biggest carpet exporter because that's what you were doing at the time, and that's all completely turned into business centres. It's been great ever since. It's like it's brought a bit more trade into it because there's a lot more people working now, but. I mean, it's definitely worth doing instead of just building upon fresh land where it doesn't need to be. So the next point will be increasing the supply of housing by identifying long-term dormant land left by central and local governments that can be released. I think it is what it is, and it's just looking at other places that have just been left behind and just develop on them. Looking at abandoned houses that have been left there for about 10, 15 years and go, right, let's just renovate them or use this as a part of those brownfield sites.
See, it's hearing these policies that makes me think, why have they written so many policies in this manifesto? I think they should just trim out the ones that aren't doable or aren't particularly sensible or well thought out, and just focus on the good ones, because they've got some good policies in here.
You have to trim the fat. It's a good manifesto, but there's a lot of just derp in there to describe it, really, isn't there? There's a bit of derp in here and there, but what they want to do.
The thing is that I think they'd be far less divisive if they trimmed out some of these policies that just, they kind of. The thing is with UKIP, if you keep banging on the immigration drum, it's just kind of, it's what you expect from UKIP.
If it worked the angle going, instead of going immigration, going for, like, at the end of the day, the people of the UK are the important people. We need to start developing that kind of area. I think overall it'll probably do better, but not taking that angle.
They'd be against something. That's I'd like to see UKIP as for things more than against.
Yeah. The next one is to ease the immediate problem. We will encourage the building of modular housing made by British companies, which is inexpensive to build and high energy efficient. Yeah, fair enough.
Modular housing, is that like the cube thing?
Let's have a look. Modular.
Yeah, there are multiple ways of it. It's basically, it can come from the one end of the spectrum, where it's like all the old Soviet and communist states who are trying to build as many houses in a short time as possible, which were also modular, to the very high-end cube and bubble houses you can buy for millions.
By the looks of it, it's very much an IKEA build property, isn't it? It's just something that's been built somewhere else and stacked on top of it.
It just makes me think of one of my professors at my university has built a house that's 3 meters by 3 meters by 3 meters, and another one that's 4 meters by 4 meters by 4 meters. I'm thinking of the cube houses. That's probably not what it is. It's just what I'm picturing.
I think it's like the rectangle houses that you see, like when they're rebuilding properties and going, right, we're going to make a stack of flats and we'll just slide one on top of the other and keep going on this big metal frame, and that's essentially what they're going about.
I see. Yeah, makes sense.
So then and I think what the probably plan is to build these kind of frames and go, right, everything's going to be running off this, like, pure off electricity instead of gas, and A+ grade light bulbs and such like that, and just slot them in.
As long as they're not, as long as they've got some character and they're not communist blocks, then I'm not against this.
As long as they're safe and not made of cheap plastic that'll snap apart at some point, I'm more okay with it, I suppose. as long as it's safe, I'll probably be okay with it.
I don't want them to be depressing either. They can't be depressing.
Yeah, they can't just be grey plastic and then hope for the best with it.
Yeah.
Right. The last one, which is UKIP will abolish stamp duty, thereby saving house buyers $16.2 billion per annum. Stamp duty, if you're a first-time buyer, you're more likely to not have to pay for it anyway, or have some kind of system to get around it, as I'm aware of anyway. You already pay taxes on the property anyway, as it is.
I think it's a good thing. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Makes people buy property, which is always good, I think.
One of the big issues with it is, like, house properties are quite an expensive thing at the moment anyway. It's just getting around it. That's also with that. That's overall with the housing part. Again, I think probably the main issue is just the overseas investors part. But other than that,
I'm not against them going after overseas, or finding ways around the overseas investor problem. I just think that there's a better way of doing it.
Yeah, I think the heart's in the right place. The execution is completely wrong, though.
Yeah, it goes against the whole libertarian side of the UKIP party.
Yeah. So, Section 7, which is the education and training. First part is, it's a great matter of concern that the state education system is turning out a large number of children who are functionally innumerate and illiterate. don't know if I agree with that or not, but
I don't know the numbers.
I don't know.
Can you guys read?
I mean, there's no. Go on, sorry, Ben.
I was saying the whereabouts are these, in numerate and illiterate children? Because the experience that my mum worked in a school, and the experience of schooling nowadays that I've been given from people that have worked in schools has been that children are actually expected to do more than they were expected to do back when I was in school. Perhaps too much pressure on them now, and I'm wondering which schools it is that are churning out children that can't read or work with numbers. And I'm wondering if there's I don't know if there's maybe a cultural element to it as well.
I think it's one of those that they've not put anything saying this is where the statistics come from. It's just that this is where it's coming from, and I think they need to be a little bit more precise at how they're coming across with that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if there are children that are struggling to read and write, one thing that I've heard from teachers and things as well is that where we've got a population now where it's more common for kids to be left at breakfast club and then picked up at after school club and not really interacted with by the parents, I'm wondering if maybe part of the issue is coming from the fact that there is not enough time anymore in the the work lives of parents and things to actually give the children a good foundation in the home. So when they go to the school kind of has to pick up. And maybe it's there's an element of our work lives of kind of we're working more hours, we're working harder, so maybe the children are losing out there more so than the education system being the problem. I don't know.
So more like the supportive system that comes behind it from the parents, which in some kind of way is expected, but it's just not there available kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think that it's just a case of the education system itself is failing. I'm wondering whether children have got a lot of pressure on them now, and maybe aren't given enough time at their own pace anymore as well. I don't know. I think there's a bunch of factors there that need to be explored before saying the system itself is just terrible in itself.
On to the next point. Teachers must be able to concentrate on what's important by cutting down on bureaucratic assessments and appraisal. Education needs to refocus on teaching children the basics. So I think that's very much suiting to what you were saying earlier as well, that it's instead of just going from all sorts of different angles and go, look, this is what needs to be taught.
Yeah, I think bureaucracy kind of came in though with league tables and competitiveness and things like that, and also I think parents now want more transparency from schools. I think that it's just we've kind of gone this way because we've wanted to kind of ensure the children have got everything perfect all the time. So there are all these assessments and everything, always to test and focus to make sure everything's perfect. Or and I think that it's just come from being a bit over the top with everything. So I'm wondering whether this would even be doable in the society that kind of bred this sort of attitude to schooling. I think it's an attitude change that would be required for this to work.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that one. The next point here is UKIP will encourage the establishment of new grammar schools, which are a proven path to social mobility for working class children.
If that's so, and if there's a demand, yeah.
Yeah, if the market's available, why not?
So grammar schools, from what I understand, are for people that perform well enough, right? If you perform to a certain extent, you get to go to a grammar school. But if you don't, you went to a secondary modern or something. Is that right?
As far as I'm aware, I mean, I went to a technical school anyway myself, so.
I'm against this just because I believe that really they should focus on better streaming things within the standard schools. I mean, why build new? Why have new grammar schools when you can just improve the systems within the schools that you already have?
I'll just come into the point just below it, just to bring it in, because reading through it, it looks like it actually merges in a little bit. Where it says UKIP will push for a range of different types of school, including grammar schools, technical, vocational, general, and especially secondary schools with a geographical area. This will make our secondary school systems more responsive to differing aptitudes, capabilities, and speed of our development for our children.
So on the flip side, because I'm not necessarily against this, but on the flip side, you have the self-fulfilling prophecy where kids are brought up to be a certain way and streamed into a school that people believe best suits them, but really it's just that they haven't had the opportunity to explore their options because they've been nudged in a direction from childhood.
Yeah, I agree with that. It sounds interesting in general, but there must be a high mobility possible between those schools. Otherwise, you end up in a technical school, and then it turns out 3 years later that you're terrible with all technology. You had a nice interest as a child, and now you're bad at it, and would be much better at a different one. So there must be ways to move between them.
But there's also a free choice aspect of it. Well, the kids might not necessarily, they might think that they want to go down a certain route, but it's not that they're not good at it. They're just not interested. They might lose interest. They might burn out. They might not work well within that system. They might get fed up with it. But once they've already spent all this time being streamed down one route that is tailored for a certain mindset, how do you then swap? Change the tracks for them? How do you put them on a different path? I mean, it seems too tailored to me.
I mean, you can look at it in the kind of sense of one child might want to be a teacher when they grow up, but ultimately when they turn 16, they decide, I'm actually interested in engineering, and that I think it's a bit of a funny one where going, right, this is where you're going to specifically go, where rather than having a broad general education where they can decide later on where they want to go.
This is where options and GCSEs and things I think are fine, because really it means that they can choose to, a few things at once that might cover different areas, but they're not kind of stuck within one. They're not just stuck with sort of mathematics and physics and things. They can do drama on the side if they want to. I don't know. I'm not too sure about this.
Going on to the next one, we'll waive tuition fees for further and higher education subjects vital to our national life. This is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medical subjects, STEM, at universities dependent upon graduates working in the UK for 5 years.
It's again where the money coming from, to pay for all this. So it's a very popular ways of education. They're very expensive to do as well.
I've got I mean, there is one way to do this. There's a very simple way of doing this. How about we stop allowing people to get loans for toilet paper degrees that give no one, like the arts degrees and things like that, and so we focus completely on giving people ways of getting into STEM fields. I mean, I think there's too much money gets wasted on the wrong degrees and qualifications and things. Where surely there's a way that we could free up some money with, with the STEM fields and things, if we were to stop paying for people to go to university to do degrees that are worth nothing.
Well, it's kind of an authoritarian approach, isn't it? Just who decides what if someone's deciding psychology is one of those toilet paper degrees, and
I mean if you look at
fall out of it, or if you do paleontology, and it's a science, but is it as important as chemistry? So who's doing the decision then what is worth to study and what not? We leave that to the people to do that? I mean, if everyone does gender studies and they all come out without no jobs and no perspective, this study will lose attraction at some point, and people will learn, okay, you should probably not do that, rather than just taking the money out of all the fields and just kind of controlling where the money goes in the university system. I think it should be open, and it should still be like a market of ideas where the different fields also compete with each other.
I mean, I'll step in on the psychology part because, say, for example, my wife, she's got a degree in psychology, but Ben might be able to agree on this one that it's absolutely worth nothing unless you got a master's on top of.
It depends really. I mean, with the psychology degree, actually you can easily go into management fields and things like that with the psychology degree, HR departments and so forth. So I think the psychology degree actually prepares you for a business work environment, as working in middle management and things like that, as well as going into the sort of more clinical fields and so forth. Plus, there's the research aspect of it. So I think that there's benefit to psychology, in a broad spectrum of things. But when it comes down to, say, sociology, it's their alpha levels, and the sciencey side of sociology is a bit more loose weave. So it's more down to, for me, it's more down to, well, demand for the society. Well, psychology can be beneficial in the sense that you need people to go into mental health sectors and so forth. So to me, I tack it on to, say, the NHS side of things. So there is a benefit for the population, where sociology, I would say, less so. It's more down to societal benefit overall for me. But I'm not saying that you don't fund them. What I'm saying is maybe you certain courses and things, maybe you don't fund as many people to go on.
I think it's very hard to do the top down and decide the quotas and plan the education for people. It's a bit. I would be very uncomfortable with that.
I agree, but at the same time, I'm wondering where, when it comes down to waiving the fees, how would you afford to do so?
Yeah, I mean, I'm against waiving the fees altogether.
Yeah,
I think it's.
I think
it's also, the problem is, why should the taxpayer completely fund people going to universities if that's a free decision for them to do so? There should be a contribution by the people going to the university. I'm not a fan of a completely free further education, because I also have seen how much even a small contribution in terms of tuition fees really makes a difference in the quality of education. So I'm just, in this case, I don't think there's any way to pay for it, even if you defund all other courses and have a highly technological range of universities. You're not able to fund this, and they have no answer to this in UKIP. It's just, we hate gender studies, we don't want that. So do STEMs. The people like it.
I mean, like the idea that they're going across with the focus on going, let's focus on STEM rather than anything that doesn't really contribute in a sense. I say contribute. I mean, currently doesn't really contribute anything more than what we to our current ideals. I suppose, really.
I just want, I'd like to see a system set up where people sort of are more inclined to choose STEM fields and so forth than choose some of the more loose weave degrees that are less beneficial to society. Just because I think that overall, more engineers and so forth is better overall for us. But I wouldn't say make it free. I'm just saying make up, if there's a way that you can kind of nudge people in that direction, then that's not necessarily a bad thing.
So I think it'd probably be like almost like we were saying back when they were saying about I think it was with someone else that was with students, with the NHS, sorry, about putting in like a bursary to help them out rather than opposed to like, go, here's your free education for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think there's already enough motivation to go in those STEM fields. If you want to do a secure job, if you want to earn money, you obviously go into engineering and not into sociology.
A lot of students don't know that when they're choosing their universities and choosing their degrees. It's all well and good when you're a mature student and stuff, but there's so many 16, 17-year-olds that don't have a clue, and they just choose kind of what interests them. I mean, that's what led to a lot of the undergrads to go onto my psychology course that I went on. I chose it as an access student who'd been in the world of work, but then there were loads of people at my university that were just there because that was the done thing. So I don't necessarily think that students are as clever when it comes down to picking some of their degrees.
Would you say possibly that there might be a bit of an education issue with it in regards to what taking an actual degree is at that point, rather than you get a degree because you need one? It's that's how it kind of come across as the feel that it's people going, it's because everyone's got one, you need to get a degree rather than pick something that you're good at.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, I completely get UKIP's coming back to it. I get their idea of where they want to come with, like focusing on STEM. But I think there's probably a different issue that they really could bring out of it that'd be a lot better, as we've discussed.
I think steering college kids into STEM would be a better idea as opposed to waiving tuition fees.
Yeah. So we'll go on to the next one, which is UKIP will support real trade apprenticeships and apprentice degree courses.
Sure, I'm not against that.
I'm not against that. I just don't know how they're going to do it.
I think if they would put up some kind of system like they have in Germany, with half school, half work apprenticeships, that's a good way to go. We have a very, very good experience with that, and that's definitely something they should look at.
I think the only thing they should do with apprenticeships is really kind of, it sounds weird, but increase the value of it, really. I mean, on my personal side, I've got an apprenticeship in business administration and bus driving, funnily enough. But it means absolutely nothing because a bus driving apprenticeship means nothing when you've already got the license. And business administration is, again, we've got a couple of call centres around where we come from, and it's not really anything more that you can really do out of it, except for those that have already got degrees to expand upon it. I just don't know. Unless they're going to really kind of go, right, we're going to put more into the apprenticeships rather than anything else. I'm not sure how apprenticeships are going to really get pushed forward.
So with apprenticeships, it might be a case of working with private companies. Perhaps as opposed to paying the university the full loan, you maybe offer the company that's providing the apprenticeship a little bit of a portion of it. So you pay the university less, pay a little bit towards the private company. The private company provides their actual time giving experience to the person working in a field, so they get they actually get the proper work experience on their CV, but at the same time the university provides the theoretical side of things, in colleges and so forth. I mean, that's the way I probably would see them doing it. It's just finding out a way to kind of incentivize companies to get on board with this scheme. But also the problem with apprenticeships is they often use people for cheap labour as well. So that would be the only other issue with this. And
probably also to get the funds back through investors in people as well, which is the other side of it as well. So the next one is UKIP will drop the artificial target of 50% of people going to higher education.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
The problem with the degrees, the massive issue with degrees in the UK at the moment is the fact that because I think it was Labour that really pushed this, the whole everyone should be able to go to university thing. Suddenly the value of a degree dropped because suddenly those people had them. So there were jobs that historically didn't require a degree to get them, but now the degree was the barrier to entry because you can get a degree. I know in the police, if you don't have a degree, there's a certain point where you hit a dead end and you actually have to get a degree to progress further and work your way up. So really, it's higher education needs to be marketed more of a, well, why would you go to higher education? What can higher education give you that nothing else can? As opposed to everyone should go to higher education as a continuation of school.
I mean, it's weird because it's one of those we can turn around and go, everyone has the right to do it. It's just how you approach it in the sense of why do you need to go? I think they should be looking at more the merit of the actual degree in a sense.
Yeah,
really. Yeah,
precisely. Why? What can the degree give you that work experience cannot? That's the key thing.
And the last one in education, and funnily enough, this came up after a BBC Three article that came up as one of the videos, which is UKIP opposes gender confusion ideologies and the implementation of compulsory LGBT inclusive relationships education in primary schools due to be introduced in September 2019. Yeah, I don't think, personally, on my point of view, I don't think anything to do with sexual relations should really be taught until you're in secondary.
See,
to a point.
the problem is with all the gender confusion stuff and the LGBT inclusive thing and all that sort of stuff. It's all very explicit and all very heavily defined within a set sort of ideological viewpoint. I'm not against sexual education for kids at ages of 10, 11, which is when I received mine. Because it was the way it was done. It was very kind of it was very sort of matter of fact, and I think it benefited some of the people that was in the classroom anyway. The problem is with the whole LGBT thing and all that sort of thing, it pushes a very set idea of what being gay and being trans and being bi and whatever is. And it makes it into an actual identity as opposed to just a thing that you happen to be.
Yeah.
So I'm against it just because of the types of people that are pushing these educational topics and their reason behind it. Where my way of discussing these things would be more, well, don't discuss them. But if the child does have any thoughts or whatever, just let them know that that's fine. They can be them, and that's not a problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to go beyond that, really. It doesn't have to be a whole thing of, well, you could be a lesbian or you could be gay. Well, just be you.
Be you. I think it's one of those that really, I agree to a point what they're saying. I think it should be more that the education towards general mutual respect amongst people and their decisions should be really more of the focus, really.
Exactly. I mean, the problem with the gender thing is that all these gender categories that have come out now, they're so bloody restrictive.
I mean, you look back at a Dankula video and he'll like an old one, and it's pretty much these millions of billions a possibility.
Yeah, the problem is that it's making I think this is one of the issues with the whole with teenagers and so forth, as well as they keep trying to find categories for themselves. And unlike in the days when I was a teenager, where people used to categorize themselves with the music subculture they associated with, now it's more questioning who and what they are, and whether they're a non-binary or whether they're trans and whatever, whether they're this, whether that's like, no, just stop defining these things. Don't teach these kids to define themselves so heavily. Just teach them to express themselves, and that's it.
Yeah,
that's what they need.
I think it's just a highly currently the LGBT, the way it is at the moment, is a highly politicized version of what, as I as a secondary school student at the time, was you a mosh or are you a chav? Were you a punk? Were you this or you that? Were you a mod or a rocker? Kind of like situation. And I think it's just where they didn't care back then, it's now become the key focus. And I think Labour's really especially pushed this into the political environment that's made this into what it is currently.
Yeah, I agree. I think the problem is that they are, the ideologies themselves shouldn't be pushed. Just mutual respect and also self-acceptance. That's it.
Yeah,
that's all they need.
I think it should be more along the lines that it should be. I wouldn't say it shouldn't be encouraged, but it should be that people be made aware of what it is. It's more of an awareness rather than this is what this is and this is what people are and this is what we expect of you.
Yeah, I mean, the gender thing, I just think it needs to be just left.
Yeah.
I think the only time there's ever a problem is if a child is actually, experiencing proper gender dysphoria, and not because they heard that, this, liking certain things might make them a different gender.
Mm.
And that's where this, it's not the schools that should step in. No, it's the doctors that should be there, and proper psychiatrists. But that's the parents. I don't believe in teaching this in school.
So that's the education and training part. Overall, yeah, it's a bit of a.
It's not very well thought out.
No, I think there's a lot of missing things in there in general. It's just how they're approaching things is just completely the wrong way of doing it.
The question is it worse than what's currently being done? That's the issue.
I don't think it's better or worse, to be honest. To a degree, I think it's just there'll be a change, but I don't think it make things any better than they currently are. It just it'll push the the issues to a different direction. To a degree.
I agree.
Yeah. So next one is transport. So with the first one, it's essentially UKIP will scrap HS2 at an estimated £100 billion. The vanity project is not affordable. HS2 will destroy the people's lives and will have a huge environmental impact. UKIP will invest in the existing railways to improve capacity and journey times. I'm very much into agreement on this one. I think the current issues is not so much HS2, but it's what we currently have with like protests with Northern Rail. Especially I feel it up here because I'm right caught on it. If I need to use a railway, I think a lot of people are struggling as it is. I mean, it's anyone across the M62 corridor struggling at the best for trains.
I'm not. For me, I'm completely. I'm against their desire to scrap HS2. Our infrastructure is bloody atrocious, and we need to actually get up to date with all of our rail networks and so forth. And I think that yes, we're a nation of commuters, and we can commute more if we have a better infrastructure. If I lived in Japan, I'd be quite happy taking the train. Where here, bugger that, I drive.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't have thought that there's a country with a worse railway system than Germany, and then came to the UK, which is like the mother of railways, and it's just atrocious. But there's a lot more that has to be done to tackle that problem. There's a lot of stuff that went wrong in the past. This whole extraordinary London centrism in the railway system is just terrible. It leads to all the traffic. The infrastructure is terrible. There's a lot to be done, and it's not just HS2, definitely.
That's a fair one to go with that one. The next one, the problem of failing rail operators should be solved by taking controls of means of a new government-owned company to run the franchises. All options would be considered. So I think it's pushing back to British Rail kind of a thing, where it's a system that works at the time, compared to how it is now, where there's constant bailouts, which is probably an issue.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the problem we have in the UK is that we have this halfway house with the fact that the companies own the trains and stuff, but we technically own the infrastructure, right?
As far as I'm aware, if it's anything like how public transport works with buses, how it works is the government owns the routes. A separate operator owns the rail. So no, it's the government that owns the rail. It's the operator that runs a route, and then it's the companies that own the trains that run them. So it's essentially you have the government, metro, and then the trains afterwards.
So I think really one of the ways of solving the problem at the moment is down to how we run the contracts to the rail companies, the expectations that we have of them when it comes down to actually giving them the contracts to run the rail services. Surely we've been too generous to them, but when it comes down to the way that they've really done a pretty bad job in ensuring the trains simply run on time. And you've got all the strikes and things like that. Surely there should be a set requirement, or otherwise they lose their contract.
I mean, you look back at the fire engines a couple of years back with the Green Goddesses coming about. I mean, the government took control of that situation to try and get things undergo, and nothing's been done with rail operators at the moment. Bit of a worrying issue because nothing's been done about it. It's just been allowed to happen.
Yeah, I think that they really just get a handle on the current system as it stands and find ways to sort of improve and tighten up the contracts with these companies as well, and set an expectation.
I think infrastructure should be one of the things that they look to deal with as soon as possible, especially with the rail operators. Anyway, it should be one of the government's main priorities for the moment, because it is a big issue. You hear about it week in, week out, and it's just not being dealt with.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if having a government franchise system would be a good idea, because isn't that pretty much close to nationalising the railways?
Yeah. I mean, to a degree, when it was nationalised, it wasn't so much of an issue, but it's depending how we take it across, isn't it, really?
The standards on the trains were atrocious back when they were nationalised. I thought that was part of the problem.
But did they run all on time? It's the other part.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a funny one. I think it comes back to the previous one, where really it's not so much of the nationalising to a degree, it's investing back into the current systems that run. So maybe, I don't know, either putting money back into the trains itself and running it, or at least put it so that there's a government system in place, but still allow private contractors to run. So therefore, it's any of the gaps that are missing, the government's filling in with their own system. So it's like a part and part mixed system.
That's fair enough. Let's move on to Heathrow.
Yeah. UKIP proposes the expansion of Heathrow Airport. UKIP will encourage the investment in regional airports. The current Heathrow plan will destroy many villages, listed buildings, as well as add to pollution in the locality. I'm very much with this one, because there's plenty of airports about that could do with development. I mean, for our local area, Manchester has got a fair amount. Leeds Bradford is like a tiny airport, but it runs, and the expansion onto there could probably help out that area.
I want to know what the justification is for the expansion of Heathrow, to be honest.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be very much, except for we want to expand it.
Yeah, it's if I understood why they wanted to expand it, I'd comment on it. But until I know why they want to expand on it and why they can't utilise other airports and expand other airports, I'm just going to say no on this one.
Yeah.
As in, agree with UKIP, but yeah, no.
Yeah. Unless they can give a legitimate reason, that's it.
Yeah, but I have to claim ignorance there, because I don't know enough about the issue.
Yeah, me neither.
The next one, UKIP will scrap all road tolls. Tolling increases cost of business in the public. Road users are already overtaxed and should not be paying twice to use our roads. We will also block any introduction to pay-as-you-go road pricing. I agree with it.
It depends on the toll, really. I mean, I drive over. Yeah, I rarely drive over toll roads, but if I do, I drive over, say, the Dartford crossing, which isn't particularly expensive. It's £2 to drive over the bridge, or £2.50, whatever, drive over the bridge. And people that live nearby get like a special, I think they get a discount or something on it, but it's not, it's not expensive anyway. But the bridge itself requires maintaining. It's a big old bridge. So I don't have a problem paying for that. The only other time I paid for a toll recently was when I drove up to Manchester for the Manchester meet, and that was, I think it was like £4 or £5 to pass the toll. But it really does depend. I don't know the cost benefit really of the toll roads. In the case of maintaining a bridge, I completely understand it, but I don't know.
I think with the dark charge, one of the issues I personally have is the fact that they've taken away the toll stations, and that is purely do it online. And that's your only option, really. And
yeah, they need to, I think they need a government app really for toll roads.
Yeah, it needs to be something that is easy to access for everybody.
Yeah, the issue is you have to log in online on gov.co.uk or whatever, and then put in an account, put in your car details and stuff, and that's how you pay for it. The good thing is you have to pay for it. You can pay for it afterwards. That's not a problem, but it's the fact you have to remember to pay for it.
Yeah.
Where if I could just have an app on my phone or something, then
I'd much prefer that, and you probably agree the same as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's if there's a or if there was a system where you like with some water companies, you can pay on a 6-month basis, and you've got your car registration gets logged in, and you can see all the tolls on an account or something. Then that would be fine as well.
Or
But
even a billing system where, like you say, it's similar to that, but say like on a monthly basis, where it's gone, we've clocked you going over this many times. You've subscribed to this system. There you go, do that.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm not against road tolls. I just think the methodology is bad sometimes.
Yeah. The execution is wrong, but the idea is there.
Mhm.
We'll jump on to the next one. UKIP will abandon the current rollout of smart motorways and instead divert their funding to road maintenance with a priority for fixing potholes. Smart motorways are perceived by the public as money-making scams, and removing the hard shoulder is dangerous. Has anybody got smart motorways near where their area is?
Yeah, the smart motorways are being rolled out near Bracknell Way, which is not too far from where I am. And my understanding of smart motorways is just that they utilize all the lanes, and it changes over time as to what lanes are being used. One other thing I've noticed is motorways that are being upgraded to smart motorways have also got better lane designation, like permanent lane markings as well.
Yeah.
The problem is people. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced people that don't even understand how to read lanes on bloody roundabouts, let alone motorways.
Yeah.
It's not. I'm not against smart motorways. I think as long as the motorways are utilised properly and people actually get used to following the rules of them, it will help to ease traffic.
For us that are smart motorways, actually pretty good in that kind of sense where we agree with you, but a lot of what we have is speed cameras every half a mile or so continuously, and I think that's where people see it as the money making scam coming back, where it's just about a million speed cameras trying to catch you out, and I think that's where the general public goes, yeah, no.
I think that's silly, but then at the same time, I'd raise the speed limits to 80 miles an hour. So
yeah, I think personally on the motorway, 80 is still safe enough, but I'm not going from a scientific point. That's just on a personal point of view, really.
they were reviewing that a few years back. I remember it might have been 2012 or something, or 2011. They're talking about upping the speed limit to 80 miles an hour. I mean, roads like the M25. I've spoken to people who have done high speed training in the police, and they said that the M25 can be taken at 120 miles an hour. The way it's set up. Not saying that it would be safe for all cars driving on it to do that, but it's safe to say that 80 is probably fine.
Yeah. So going on to the next one, UKIP will stop diesel drivers from being penalised from discriminatory parking fees or zone charging. Moderate diesels are far cleaner today, and many people bought their vehicles in good faith on government advice. Opinions on that one? I mean, I'm not too clued up on that one, unfortunately. So,
I mean, diesel. The things with diesel is a lot of people buy diesel cars when they don't need diesel. Now, a lot of people did buy diesel incorrectly, and continue to buy diesel incorrectly. But I don't see. I don't see a problem here with zone charging and stuff, because the whole point of zone charging is like the low emission zones and things is to effectively try and get people to sort of pay a bit more, or then de-incentivize people bringing high sort of petrol or fume chucking out cars in certain areas. From what I understand, I don't know too much on the issue. But I don't see a massive issue with it.
Yeah, it depends on the impact diesel cars really have and how straightforward the science behind it is. If they're too dirty, they're too dirty. And if that's like a recent development that people realize that they're dirty, yeah, they might board them in good faith. But if you have to do something about it, you have something to do about it. I mean, UKIP doesn't give a lot of crap about environmental policies, so I'm not surprised it's in there. But yeah, it's different when they board the cars and the cars don't meet the expectations they had of them because the producers fake them, like with these big scandals coming up from German manufacturers. Then it should be up to the manufacturers to either update the cars or offer them alternatives free of charge. That would be my position on that.
Yeah.
All of this.
The next one is UKIP supports the transition of electric vehicles by but the electrical charging infrastructure is not keeping up with the pace. We should support the installation of charging stations by diverting funds from the electric car subsidiary. We will also encourage off-street parking and charging provisions in all new housings and industrial development throughout the local planning process.
Yeah,
I can't find a fault in that at all.
Yeah, sounds actually reasonable.
Yeah, I mean it's developing for the future, really, isn't it? It's trying to take off petrol, going to electric, and make sure that people can charge the cars up while they're at work or at home.
Yeah, I'm completely for this.
Yeah, I agree with it.
I don't think that electric cars are going to be the future. I think that eventually when we do like hydrogen and things, they're going to be the way to go. But you know, electric cars are here now, and we do need to sort of factor them in.
Yeah. The next one is UKIP supports development of driverless car technology. I can't find a fault in that one again. I mean,
good on them.
Good on them. I think in the future, hopefully the technology will be better to actually implement it, but currently, definitely not. But
Yeah.
as long as they're supporting development to make it available, then I can't see any problem with that, really.
I mean, it says UKIP supports the development, but that doesn't say that They doesn't say they're gonna support it. That just says they support it.
Yeah. It's just that they agree with it. It doesn't mean that they're gonna chuck money at it either.
I wouldn't want them to anyway. I mean, that's private companies to solve, I think.
Yeah, I think that's down to that's their product and they're available to do that, really. The last one is UKIP will scrap the EU-derived law for certificate of professional competence, which is the CPC, which has been severely damaging to the UK haulage industry. Its unnecessary qualifications has led to the shortage of HGV drivers in the UK. I'm not too sure if you guys know what CPC is, but I'll be more than happy to explain it to you if you'd like.
Please do. Yeah, I don't know.
So, CPC is how you get your license and how you maintain it afterwards. So, to get your license as a CPC driver, you have to do a theory test, which is 85% correct answers out of 100. You then do a case study, which is, I believe, 8% out of 100 and it was out of 50 questions, so it's 45 out of 50. Trying to think what it's called now. The actual visual test that you do while you're watching the vehicle driving around the road and doing the clicks. So you do that as well. Then you come down to your actual test, which is a driving test and a test where you go around the vehicle pointing out errors, how you deal with situations, and what you do for your regular tests before you drive out in the vehicle. So like checking your lights, how you turn on the engine, how you make sure everything's working, where people are smuggling drugs and such like that. So basically it's going through a lot of custom tests and such like that. And that's what you do to get your license. The next stage is that you'd have for every 5 years, you'd have to spend 35 hours training. So 7 hours a year, I believe it were. And essentially what you'd do is you'd have either a driving test or customer service test to make sure that you're doing things. There's no marks for it. It's literally just an educational bit they give you. And all they have to go is, yep, you've done your 7 hours and that's it. But it has to be by the EU law. It was 35 hours for every 7 years. The part that I agree with it is how you get your license. The part that I don't agree with is the repeated training, because essentially you're doing the job anyway. As a part of it, I think what the part that it doesn't address is the fact of how trying to think the way it is now. For those that are not regular users of HGV or PCV vehicles. But again, if you've got the license, you're perfectly fine to use a vehicle. I think once you've got your license, you're qualified, and that's it. You shouldn't have to do the additional training when you're driving a car. So why should it go to additional vehicles when it's bigger?
I don't think you should have to do so. Based on this, I don't think additional training should be necessary. Maybe a little refresher session or something, but not one that you get graded on just as something that's
I don't think it should be a legal requirement, but probably more of a company requirement, really. If anything, it should be down to the company's responsibility, not the government's.
Yeah, a company requirement. I think even then, if it was governmentally required that you just have a refresher session, but there's nothing that's going to negatively affect you or penalise you. It's just a general good idea thing. I'm not against that, to be fair.
Yeah.
But it'd have to be based around your work time, so it fits into your working hours and your work schedule. So the company would have to accommodate it. It's the company's job to arrange it. It's the government's job to ensure the company complies to it. Maybe.
I think what it comes down here to is, besides all the sense behind it, how it affects the relationship with the EU when the UK just jumps out of this certificate. Will British HIV drivers be able to drive in the EU without that easily, or does there have to be another type of agreement for them to go, or are they stopped at the border? I think this is the real issue here. The UK just jumps out of this certificate. Will British HIV drivers be able to drive in the EU without that easily, or does there have to be another type of agreement for them to go, or are they stopped at the border? I think this is the real issue here.
So that's the heavy goods side of it. So let's go to foreign affairs.
Yeah.
Far more interesting. I want to read this one. Post-Brexit Britain's foreign policy no longer needs to be linked to the EU's common security and defence policy, which inevitably involve us in the EU's planned armed forces and embroil us in foreign policy ambitions. We should put the need of our own citizens first. Our foreign aid budget is often wasted on corrupt regimes or given to countries that can afford their own atomic weapon and space programs. So, straight away, EU army thing again.
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, we had that already. It's the same thing.
We should help forces insofar as if it benefits us, and it's not just getting us involved in conflicts we don't want to be involved in.
Yeah.
If it's defensive side of things and so forth, fine. But this is a UKIP thing to bang on about an EU army, it seems.
Yeah.
I mean,
they go on with a foreign aid thing, but it's just when we read the next bit with overseas aid stuff, and I think this is one of the big parts where they actually want to scrap it to have money for all the other little treats and Snickers they give out with tuition fees and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think this is where a lot of it's going to come from, isn't it? Really, this part.
Yeah, we want the money for other things, and then on the other hand, again, trying to leave the world alone, keep completely out of it, not giving the money, which has some sensible reasons to give foreign aid. I mean, it works against the people migrating from there to equalize the point. I think it's the same point UKIP misses with the EU all the time, saying we put more money in than we get out, which has very reasonable sensible thoughts behind it to do that. And the overseas aid it's just pulling out the UK out of everything and then wondering why everything else is not working the way we want it. I don't know. I'm not a fan of that. I would rather work against reasons of migration in other countries other than stupidly waive some tuition fees or throw money somewhere else just for the sake of it.
I mean, one of the parts they got on there is obviously the first point there, going under Labour and Conservative governments, we have engaged in wars that have not brought peace and instead been made the world more dangerous place, and Britain's foreign policy should be strictly framed that viewpoint and what's in the UK's national interest, and we should not allow ourselves to be swept into war on someone else's coattails. And I think that's probably more directed like the Iraq War and such like that, instead of just going, yes, we'll do this because our allies say so.
Yeah, that's probably the reasons Ben to have not to jump on every war brought forward by the US or something. It's definitely reasonable, but then draw the wrong conclusions out of it and say, okay, if we pull our armies out, we also pull our foreign aid out, because it's basically the same thing, and that's just going very wrong. I think they misunderstand the importance to build up strong trade partners for the future.
Yeah, I think foreign aid is the way that it's often shaped is it's shaped as sort of like almost like an Oxfam thing where we go in and give money and and relief and all that sort of stuff. But really, with the foreign aid policy, I think foreign aid needs to be sort of framed and explained in a way that it's actually beneficial to us in the long run as an investment with some nations,
instead of just here's a load of money, get better, kind of situation.
We've given this country this money. However, they've got these nice resources, and they gave us these resources in return for our nice foreign aid. So actually, we get a benefit from it. That would be a nice way of kind of explaining it. Because I think that foreign aid itself, I do agree that throwing money at countries where just because we feel bad about their situation, I do agree that that's not necessarily a good thing. But we need to kind of break down each sort of case really with foreign aid, as opposed to just saying it's all terrible.
Yeah. Don't scrap, just really work on make it more efficient.
Yeah. Obviously with foreign aid, David Cameron committed the UK 0.7%, currently at 14 billion of the GNI, gross national income, to overseas aid. So it's a purely artificial construct. Much of this money goes to corrupt governments and lost in fraud. Yeah, I mean, to the point where the funding girl bands, it says it there, doesn't it? Really.
We really need a better breakdown as to where our foreign aid is going, and what it's being used for. I think actually, if we started with getting a better understanding of maybe instead of like looking at withdrawing and restricting foreign aid, proposing that after a system where UKIP actually goes in to establish and calculate how much foreign aid there is going where and what it's being used for, so the British people know what their foreign aid money is doing and how it's benefiting people overseas. It could be shaped as a positive policy, and then it wouldn't be used for corrupt governments because the British people wouldn't stand for it.
Yeah.
If we knew where it was going, then we can then moan about the right things as opposed to moaning about everything.
Yeah. Going on with the second point that they put in there is that they'll scrap the 0.7 GNI and place it back in the H and Treasury to assist our own citizens in our own country. So it's directing that money directly back into it. So maybe that 14 billion might be going into like tuition fees to help out there, I suppose. But I think personally, I think it should be more bursary rather than anything else. If that's where that money's coming from, it could be going into infrastructure or anything else. But
the thing is, the foreign aid thing. If a country benefits us and we do, we actually gain monetarily from propping a country up, or helping them to be able to get certain resources to us or something like that, then I'm not against foreign aid. However, if we are just throwing money at a country that can't take care of its own citizens and will never prop itself up, then I am, this is where I do agree with withdrawing foreign aid.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that charity does begin in the home, and I think that we as a nation should be a shining example of a decent quality of life for our citizens.
Well, it's setting the standard for everyone else, isn't it? Really, it's going, look, this is where you could be.
Yeah,
sorting out this out. We'll give you that aid to achieve that level, but you need to start putting it into that level, or we'll just withdraw it. Simple as.
But precisely. I mean, it's I know that there will be people out there that have this thing of all colonialism and stuff, but the reality is that there are some countries where they prop up, leaders that are just completely atrocious. Their human rights records are terrible, but their people would love to have the British, assist them and be a close ally in order to help them to help themselves. Not with the goal of taking over the country, but the goal of assisting, and then we benefit a little bit from the spoils of what we've helped them to achieve. But at the same time, going and throwing money at people, and hoping that their countries will do better is not the way to go.
No,
it's there are better ways to do foreign aid, I think.
Yeah. Which nicely ties into the next bit. UKIP supports government providing genuine disaster relief and humanitarian aid as appropriate. UKIP would return to the old system in which the DFID was a small directorate of the Foreign Office responsible for disaster relief on an as and when basis. So it's like putting money back into what's already fallen apart, at least trying to restore a country back to where it were.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't see a fault in that, really. I mean, it's helping out someone when they're being kicked down, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against that, and I think that also allows you to assess who it is you're helping as well. I think it's as appropriate as the key bit here. I'm for that.
Yeah. And the last bit is UKIP supports existing systems whereby citizens can donate to foreign aid charities and receive tax and relief. Yep. That's down to the individual. That's their choice at the end of the day.
I don't believe that donations to charity should be taxed. So, of course.
If you're donating money to help out something else, that's where all that money should be going.
Exactly.
Right then.
To be honest, looking at the time now, if we get started on this, are we going to finish it within 10 minutes?
I don't think so, but I think doing this section 10, do defense and security, and we'll call it at that point.
That's smaller than I thought, actually. Sorry, I'm only looking at this.
Yeah.
So it's.
So I think we'll do defense and security, and then we'll call it that, and looking to do possibly part 2.
Yeah.
Later on, to do the rest of this later on, because
there's a lot to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say we started streaming, and it's an approximate 2 hours, probably more because it's nearly midnight now. So it's probably like 2 hours and a half, and we've got to section 10 now. So we'll go straight into this. UKIP believes that we should not get involved in international conflicts unless it can clearly shown to be in national interest. The first point being UKIP is committed to NATO for our collective defence. UKIP expects all NATO members to honour their commitment to contribute a minimum of 2% GDP.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the things where I go, yes, I completely agree with it, and that other countries that are not meeting up to that quota should really be, penalised to a degree. If say like Germany being one of the big culprits for it in its own sense, but then it's propping up like PESCO or other systems, why can it not contribute to NATO in the first place? Bit of a weird one, really.
I agree.
Right, on to the next one then. UKIP will withdraw from the UK from the EU's attempts to create its own armed forces through, for example, through PESCO. Again, the permanent structured cooperation that we talked about earlier. That has already been committed by the Conservative government prior to Brexit, and from Mrs May's proposal proposed new EU security treaty. Again, it's like we said earlier with PESCO, it's not exactly a bad thing to a degree if it's one of those kind of like crisis control situations, but if anything else, it's a bit an additional add-on, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more down to how the if there were, let's speak in hypotheticals here. If there happened to be an EU army that was controlled by the EU specifically, the people at the top of the EU, then fine, I'm not for that. However, is that really going to be how it's going to run?
Personally, I don't think it will. It'll probably be delegated onto one of the EU members, if anything.
Yeah.
And it depends. Then I'd probably say by extension, it needs to be respective of other treaties that may exist. I mean, it sounds like I'm banging on about Germany for that one, but it's very much there's a treaty there in place because of previous problems following World War II mainly, but or World War One even to a point. Yep. So we'll go on to the next one then, shall we? Britain's Royal Navy, Army, and Royal Air Force have been so reduced in size that they struggle to meet their own commitments. UKIP is committed to adequately funding the British Armed Forces.
Yeah, not much on that bone to pick.
No, I mean
it's
pretty straightforward. A country needs at least a good army and its additional armed forces, and it can't be left subject to being absolutely nothing really and reliant on another country.
So this is, I understand the need to grow the armed forces with Brexit coming. That makes total sense. Have they really been struggling to meet their commitments? I'm not really aware, to be honest.
I mean, it's a bit funny because 2 points before they say that they will cut down on all the commitments, and then now they say they need a bigger army to meet the commitments. Do they want to scrap them or not? Because if they cut down all the commitments they currently have and pull them out of PESCO and everything, why would you need to grow the British Armed Forces? Is the demand not going to go down? It's just not saying enough. There has to be more information about this point. What is adequate? What struggles do the forces have now? What do they need to meet it? Do they need more submarines or for what? I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's generally down to manpower as of recent, because there's been a lot of axing of jobs, especially in the Air Force. It's been reduced down to a set level, and that's been going on for years and years and years.
That's been redundancies, hasn't it? But they've been hiring reserves and things at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's more the redundancies surely is just part of a restructure.
Yeah.
I don't know. They haven't really sold to me the struggles of the army and really told me what commitments they need to meet. So I'm not buying it.
Yeah, I think the main issue is this is kind of one of those that steps into either those that are a lot more sympathetic towards the armed forces, or it's initially designed for the exit of PESCO in its own kind of sense. I think that's what it's trying to recuperate by going, well, if we leave this is what we'll do instead.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes into the next point as well.
Yeah, where UKIP will initiate a defence review to consider our future defence requirements and size and shape of our armed forces. The additional part of this bit is UK manufacturers will get first call on providing our armed forces equipment. Fair enough. Trade on the inside if you can, but I'm guessing that goes against the previous thing they said about, especially with the NHS and looking out in the free market for products.
Would probably make it more expensive.
So. Yeah. I think it's a little bit contradictory of what they're coming on, where defence and security is a different issue to the NHS if they're going along the lines of going, if we're going free market territory.
Yeah, I think really it's, down to sort of cost benefit sort of thing. I mean, it's when it comes down to the UK, one issue that we have is we've moved to a service-based economy, and that's affected the jobs market. So having a greater requirement and a greater amount of work sort of pushed onto UK manufacturers, that could be a good thing when it comes down to providing jobs in certain areas and stuff. But at the same time, if it's a great cost, well, what's the point?
Yeah. And sorry, carry on.
I was saying because the types of equipment that you need to manufacture in for the army is sort of more injection moldings and forgings and things like that. So it's stuff that's unlike drugs laboratories and things like that. It's not, the equipment won't be as expensive, so the manufacturing surely wouldn't cost as much. I don't know. I'm just thinking in terms of what they'd be making. If they can be if they can provide jobs over here and it doesn't cost too much more to get it done over here, then maybe it's worth doing. I don't know.
But again, it's one of those. It's looking at the cost overall, isn't it? Really. Yeah. And the last one is, and this is the biggie one. UKIP is committed to maintaining the Trident nuclear deterrent.
Yep.
I guess that's a yeah from you as well.
You can't, probably won't denuclearize without everyone doing it. So
yeah, I mean, it's the last threat, isn't it? It's the going. Well, we didn't receive a text, so nuke them guys. Cheers, thank you.
Mutually assured destruction has kept the peace to a certain extent for years. Why would we stop now?
Yeah, I mean, it's worked for now, and that's the end of it, really, isn't it? So,
yeah, simple.
Yeah. Right then, so we'll call this part 1 of the UKIP Manifesto.
Yeah, we'll have to amend the title to part 1 because
this
is far longer than expected, and
we're almost at a 3-hour video at best, anyway. So,
past my bedtime.
Yeah. So this has been Richard, Andreas, and Ben. Hope you've had a lot of good time, and we'll see you for part 2.
Yeah, see you next time, guys.
Nighty night, everyone.
Night night.